I have written a full strength training plan that's swim focused using resistance bands that wrote up in like March of last year when everything was closing down. That's available on Training Peaks. What I'll do is I'll go in after this is over and I'll create a code for the group so that if anybody wants it, they can download it for free and not have to pay for it.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that'll be way more, like, it's kind of hard really to do this. Like, we can talk, but as far as movements and things like that, that's really hard to do with this. But in the training program, we had AJ, who's my business partner and the one who likes to be in front of the camera. We had him actually video and explain all of the different movements in great detail. And we have links to all those videos in the actual training programs. So basically, like, hold your hand and walk you through how to do them all, what you're trying to feel and that kind of stuff. So it'll just be way more detailed than like what I'll be able to get into for this. So I'll get that up and then I'll get you the code, Hillary, and you can push it out with I'll give you the code and I'll give you a link to where they can find it on Training Peaks if anybody wants it.
Okay.
Awesome.
Tim, does that include stretching as well?
This one does not. What it incorporates is basically 3 swim focused resistance band workouts during a week that are one's gonna be like strength based, more of a strength, heavier type resistance and type of motions. One's going to be more turnover and tempo, and then another one's just going to be more like if you were doing an aerobic swim and just kind of going through the motions. So we structured it like we would structure a swimming plan. If you are looking for a particular type of, if you're looking for a stretching and mobility routine you can incorporate into it, I can send you, like, I have a routine that's like that anybody can do at home because usually that's where most people are going to do it. So I can just send you that and you could like incorporate it on either at the same time or off days or, whatever, however it fits. But it's very condensed and simplified because usually stretching and mobility is the first thing people get rid of when they're training because it's just more time. So we've condensed it down to about 15 minutes so that it's more practical in everyday life. Like when I'm training hard, I do mine like during my lunch, like, because then I know I can get it in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just wondering, just because I was watching an old swim video and I was, for some reason, I was watching some of the guys warming up, as they were getting, and I couldn't believe how flexible these guys were in like their shoulder joints. It was, remarkable. And
yeah, and I know you've had Carlin talk a bunch, Carlin Pipes, and I'm sure she's mentioned it too, that like, she talks about shoulder flexibility all the time and how like the way that I swim and you guys swim should be different than the way like a professional swims. Mm-hmm. Just in terms of mobility, like the easiest test is like you see, if you're diving and it's like, oh, put your arms up and tuck your head inside of your arms, right? And so most people look like this, because that's all they have. They can't get like to get streamlined like that. And the truth is that actually, it took me about 2 years to get to where I could do that. Mm-hmm. Just stretching. And she was here in town a few years ago where she was actually talking about that. And she said, everybody do this, and I like, and I got like this. And she goes, oh, she goes, do you have a swimming background? And everybody in my club started laughing because for years I was the token slow swimmer. Like, I was the slowest guy in the club. Like my first race, I swam like 3 minutes per 100, And so she's like, oh, you must be a swimmer. And everybody lost it. They thought it was so funny. Yeah. I was like, nope, just practice. But all right. So we will start with the easiest question. Who actually has resistance bands at home?
I do.
And you know, like ones like this, right? Like longer ones.
Mhm.
Okay. So you actually see swimmers have been using resistance bands for an extremely long time. Even if it's just for them to warm up before they get in the pool. You know, because they get to do a warm up usually, like when you go to major competitions, they're swimming all the time. Like there's always a race going on. So they only get like a couple minutes in the pool because the pool is always full. So they'll go in and do that. And then while they're waiting for their actual swim, they will go to bands and they'll warm up for like 10 or 15 minutes with resistance bands. The great thing about them is they are inexpensive. They are small. You can take them anywhere. And because it's graduated resistance, right? The farther you stretch it, the stiffer it gets and the more resistance you gain. You can do almost anything you want with it. And that is a great luxury to have. There are a lot of different types. These are called stretch cords. I like them because they actually have paddles on the ends. But if you have the ones that have the loop or the bar, it works just as well. You just have to be mindful of your hand position, basically, because like these have a paddle, you put your hand's in the proper spot, right? If you have one that has the bar on it, you just want to make sure that that is going across where your fingers meet your hand. So you want it across there so that you don't want it, cockeyed or anything like that. You want to make sure that it's going evenly across your hand. Because otherwise you're going to end up turning your wrist or doing something that you necessarily shouldn't be doing. And the biggest point of doing dry land training is muscle recruitment, muscle engagement, and therefore building muscle memory. Like I haven't been in the pool in a year at this point, like because our pools were closed, and then when they were open, the whole racing season was canceled, and so I didn't get in. But this allows me to keep engaged, and I'm getting back to the point where I'm finally ready to get in the pool. But once you have your bands, and you have them, obviously you want to set them up in a situation that allows you to go through swimming movements where you're pulling back towards your body. I was having a discussion with one person, and they were saying they hung them over their, the door and closed the door, and it didn't feel quite right standing up. So what they ended up doing was they had a weight bench, and they like laid on their weight bench, right? So then they were in a horizontal swimming position, and so it felt a lot more natural going through the movements. So if you have those tools, like a bench or anything like that, then you should take advantage of it, because you can take these anywhere you want and set them up however you want. But the main focus is going to be that muscle recruitment and muscle memory. So if you think about a swim stroke, right, when there's the entry phase of your stroke with your hand, right, you have very, very little resistance, right, because your hand is entering the water. And then as you go through the pull phase of your stroke, at this point, you're the most powerful that you can be, right? Because your hand is under your body and you're using, your shoulders and your upper back, and you're getting a lot of muscle recruitment and engagement here. But as you get down towards the hips, right, it becomes, that part of the stroke is the hardest part of the stroke, because you're now past that point of general engagement. And so a lot of people end up pulling out of their swim strokes early because it gets hard down there. The benefit of these bands, because they are gradual resistance, is as you go through that stroke, the tension gets stiffer. So it actually does a very good job of simulating how it would feel in the water. And because you don't have to worry about drowning or breathing, you can use it as a time to focus on finishing your stroke, getting your movements correct, getting fluid and comfortable all the way through your swim stroke, which you may not do as well in the water because you're trying to get to the other end. You're thinking about breathing. What is my kick doing? Like, you know, you're trying to process so many other things. And you don't have to do that when you're on dry land. It also allows you to isolate different parts of your swim stroke. The biggest flaw that most people have as far as being faster swimmers, so we're talking about you're already comfortable swimming, you know, you can swim laps and do all that stuff, but you're not necessarily improving, you've hit a plateau, something like that. Most people's biggest flaw is that they do not engage the water early enough, meaning that when their hand gets in the water, it takes them a very long time to get from this position to this position, right? If you watch any video of fast swimmers, whether they're Olympians, triathletes, you know, whatever, the first thing you notice in underwater footage is once their hand enters, the first movement is from the elbow. It's their shoulder doesn't move. The first thing that they're doing is getting what's called an early vertical forearm, because now your paddle that's pushing water goes from this size to this size. But if you've ever made that movement, whether in the water or just like this and outside, it feels extremely unnatural. Like it feels like your shoulders shouldn't move that way. Like it doesn't feel normal. It's not a part of our day-to-day physiology of moving. So when you have resistance bands, you can focus on developing just that movement, right? There's no, what's my head doing? What's everything else doing? You could literally just set your bands up and just do reps of this movement, you know, to get the feel for what it should feel like. It also gives you the ability to say, do it in front of a mirror if you want it, so that you can then actually see what you're doing, which you don't have access to in a pool. You know, so you can isolate those different parts of your swim stroke. Anywhere that you feel like you have a flaw, or if your swim coach has told you you need to work on this or that or whatever, you can use your bands to focus on those pieces, and you have the ability to move it to somewhere potentially where, like I was saying, you have a mirror and you can make sure that you're getting it right. The whole purpose of these bands is to prepare yourself to be as efficient as possible in the water. Yes, when I use them, I get a muscular workout out of it. If I'm doing something harder, for sure, like I'll feel it. You know, I'll stretch the cords out and make them stiffer so that I get more intense of a workout sometimes. But the primary focus is that engagement, making sure you're doing it correctly, working, like I said, working on any flaws, because you can focus on just that. You know, there's so many different parts to swimming in real time that it's hard to focus on one thing because there's 10 things happening. So with the bands, that's never an issue. As far as how to, if you wanted to incorporate a routine like the one I was talking about, that like a strength routine like we built, it's just like any other routine, that it should be progressive. You know, you should build it up. You should go through a multitude of different movements. I know his name's not iPad. It says it is, but I know that is not his name. But so, you know, you want to go through the movements, you want to make it progressive. You will be surprised if you've never done dryland training. If you go in and try to do it, you know, kind of try to attack it, like you're going to be sore the next day, because it literally, you can't compensate for it the way you can in the pool. If your stroke is wrong in some form or fashion, you compensate with your kick, or with how you turn your shoulder, or like you do something to compensate for it. Because the bands isolate everything, you will quickly find out where you're lacking in your swim stroke that maybe you can't find in the pool. You know, you can't hide it when you're doing isolated movements. One thing that you will probably encounter, and I know I did, was that I was very choppy with the bands. Like my movements, I thought they're fluid in the pool. When it's just that one part of my body being isolated to focus on the movement, all of a sudden, like I was, like all over the place, and it wasn't super stable. And I realized, oh man, well, I'm clearly compensating in the pool. So then it was like, well, let's work on just that repetition of just that segment until it becomes fluid. And then when you get into the pool, things feel totally different. Like you feel more automatic in the pool. Like you just feel like you know what you're doing, as opposed to you think you know what you're doing. And yes, you'll see strength. You could see strength increases from it. Yes, you can see yourself get faster from it. But the reality is in triathlon, like, yes, being faster is always better. But for most people, the swim is really about setting up the rest of their race, right? It's getting through the swim without wearing yourself out, so that you can continue on with the rest of the race. And what these movements will do in becoming smoother and more fluid in that is it will just make your swimming a whole lot more efficient. And in triathlon, like, efficiency is the name of the game. Like, the more efficiently you can move from A to B, generally the faster you're going to do it, but the fresher you're going to be when you get to B. So then when you go from B to C, you can do more. So they are very underutilized and unrecognized tool. Every professional triathlete and real swimmer has bands in their bag. They travel with them because they're too darn easy to use. So
Tim, based on what you just said, are you better off, incorporating some band work before you do a swim as a way to not only build strength, but also focus on your technique?
Yeah, absolutely you can. And it is definitely, if you have the time to do it, that, and the place to do it, like, that's a great idea. If you've ever been to a triathlon, for example, where you're not allowed to do a warm-up swim, right? And most of us have been to one like that. And if they have an elite or open or a pro field, if you look at them, they all have like bands wrapped around trees, and they're going through, and they're doing that to basically get themselves, to warm themselves up, not just warming up the muscle, but to get the feel, so that when they get in the water, they can just go. So yeah, if you're focusing on something, you want to work on this part of your stroke, it's a great idea to do that with your bands before you get in, so that you're like, oh, that's what that's supposed to feel like. Got it. And then you hop in the pool, and now you have that feeling to chase, as opposed to, well, I think it felt like this, when I did it last week, so let me try it. And you're going to warm yourself up more too, which it never hurts to warm up, right? Most of us are pretty time crunched. We hop in and you're going. So by focusing on that, you're giving yourself a warm up as well. So that's a great idea if you have the time to do it.
Okay.
What do you think about paddles, though? Don't they do the same thing?
No. So paddles, there's different types of paddles. There is the normal type of paddle that looks, similar to this that you would use in the pool, and it'll have a bunch of holes drilled in it or whatever. And then there are, now these are called, or what I call them, I would call a paddle like this a strength paddle. This paddle will not fix any issue in your swim stroke. If you have one, say you bring your arm in too close to your head, this is going to exacerbate that issue. going to lead to shoulder, it can lead to shoulder pain and nerve impingements and things like that. So the other type of paddle I call a form paddle. They're usually much narrower. They're shaped, a lot of times they're shaped like a triangle. And most often you'll see it almost has like a rudder on the bottom. And those are about form. They usually only have one loop on them. That's for your middle finger. So you can't have it like wrapped around your wrist or anything like that. And what those are designed for is hand position. That's what they're for. If you go in with your hand wonky like the pad, you'll lose the paddle. It'll spin off or something like that. Paddles are a great swimming tool. They do, if you're using the strength paddles correctly, yes, you will get more upper back engagement and things like that. But they will also highlight any issues or deficiencies in your swim stroke, to the point that it can cause injuries, soreness, inflammation, swimmer shoulder, like if you don't fix them. What bands do is it will highlight the issue just the same, but it's much harder to hurt yourself because you can slow down, you can focus, you can choose to step a little closer to your anchor point so you have less resistance. So you can do a lot more with it. They will never replace paddles. Paddles in the pool have their place for sure. I use them quite often, but I look at them as two very separate tools in my toolbox.
Thank you.
Who else has questions? I hate listening to myself talk.
Yeah, sorry, I popped in late. Steve here.
Yeah.
I'm interested in those bands because I like what you were discussing. It does let you focus on just isolating that, and as I said, on dry land, mimicking a stroke without having to concentrate on the other 100 different things that are going on when you're in the pool. And so I'm very interested in what you're discussing. Because for me, as a historically poor swimmer, I know that in the pool, I've worked with paddles before. I know all the other little, tricks of the trade. I always found them just to be more distracting than anything else from what I'm trying to do. And never had any illusions about where I thought I was going to go from being, a kind of a poor swimmer to, just making some leap to being like, in a master's competitive kind of group. I just want to be more efficient. And I think what you're discussing has a good opportunity because it gives you an opportunity to warm up, get those muscles moving before you get into the pool or before you get into a race. Because you're right, that's always been a problem. And it's worse, I think, for poor swimmers because when we had races where we had like mass starts, I know they don't do that very much anymore. You're just thrown into the washer machine of all that, and most of us just get trashed in the middle of it, and it takes a good portion of the swim just to get comfortable in the stroke because you haven't warmed up. Maybe you got to kind of just splash around for a few minutes just to get wet, but you're not warmed up. So poor swimmers suffer even more because they have even a bigger disadvantage because now they can't get comfortable in the water, can't get warmed up. Naturally good swimmers, they just hit their rhythm pretty quickly and they're gone. So using bands as you described could really be helpful to people before you even get in the water.
100%. And I'll say like I was a poor swimmer. So if you're a poor swimmer, you don't have to stay a poor swimmer. Now, I'll obviously never be like an elite level swimmer. But like I went from a 3 minute per 100 swimmer to a sub 130 per 100 swimmer.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Right. So like my first half Ironman swim was an hour and 8 minutes. My last Ironman swim, which was current aided somewhat, was a 55-minute swim. So like it, and it should have been about an hour and 3. So like I've cut my swim pace about in half. And that's with I have no formal background in my youth. Like when I got into triathlon, I thought I knew how to swim because like I used to go to a lake on vacation, then jump off of boats and docks and paddle around. I was always comfortable. I was never worried about drowning. But then saying, go from here to there as quickly and efficiently as possible, like way down there, like, that's a whole nother ball game. So you're 100% correct that when you're the uncomfortable swimmer or the not very good swimmer, like most people that are that way don't want to get in the pool or in the water early anyway, right? Because you're like, I have to save myself. Like I don't want to waste strokes, while they're all out there 20 minutes beforehand warming up, because I'm going to need all of them just to get out of the water, right? That was my mindset, before. And so this can add that tool that you're talking about that maybe you don't have a chance to get in, or for whatever reason you're not going to get in, that you can start the engagement, start the warm-up process, so that when it's time to swim, you're ready to swim. And it works like anything else. Like I find a lot of people do the same thing with running. Like if you want to run fast, most people don't warm up, right? They go to a race and they're saving it for the race. I don't want to run beforehand because I need it for the race. Well, if you warmed up, you would run a lot faster. Like it's just the way it works. I warm up all the way up through a half marathon. Like even if I go warm up, like my half marathon warm up's 20 minutes long. Even though it's like, well, you're running 13 miles, like you got time to build into it. And it's like, but what are you trying to accomplish? If you're just out there to have fun or what, then of course, absolutely. Or if you're, not trying to go for broke, then absolutely there's no need to. And the same would apply in swimming. But warming up is a great tool, is a great process that most people never take advantage of. And you should, no matter what it is. Like, even if you're out cycling, for example, like even on my normal workouts, if say I have to do, 2 15-minute intervals that are like, above, like at about my Olympic bike pace or something like that, like I'll ride aerobically for an hour before I do it. Just because like I'm going to perform better. You don't get that luxury in a race, but the idea is to be as efficient and get as much benefit out of your training as possible, so that when it's time to race, you can pull that out of your bag, so to speak. So it's critical when you're training, if you can warm up, to do so. Obviously if you're limited on time, sometimes that stuff just happens, but it's a great tool, and the bands are the easiest way for someone to warm up for swimming, even if you have access to them.
That brings up an interesting point, because during a normal triathlon, and especially if you're in one of the older age groups, which I'm in, by the time they close the water for warm up and you're lined up, it may be anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes before you're actually in the the water, and by that time your kind of warm up is dissipated. So I was thinking, okay, what can you do to stay warm ups other than windmills or whatever, something like that?
Take your bands with you.
and just leave them at the starting line.
Well, so it depends on what you want to do. Like if you have someone there, like family or friends or whatever, you can hand them off to. Or if you're like, for me, almost every race I go to, like my triathlon club is there, so we have a tent and stuff that you can throw stuff at. If you can't, then what I generally tell people is, say you're at a race alone, you have your bag and all that stuff, and they make you go set it off to the side of transition, right? Can't be in the rack areas. Well, if you set your bag next to the fence or whatever they're using as the barrier, you can go drop your bands in it.
Okay.
So you put it in and try to put it in a position where you can reach it, or at least toss them on top or something like that. Generally, people, triathletes as a whole are a pretty good group of people. They don't generally mess with other people's stuff. There's always the exception to that rule, but it's a very small exception. But yeah, so in that case, like I'm 36, so because I'm under 40, I still generally start near the front of a race, right? They'll do relays and Clydesdales and whatever, and the pros will go first, and they'll go, and then they'll be like men under 40, right? Like they're usually like, get all the stupid people out there out of everybody else's way and let them go beat the crap out of each other. So, when they're like, oh, the water's closing, I get out, I have 5 or 10 minutes, so I'm fine. But in the case that you're in a later wave, then I would take them, as long as you're going to have access to your bag, then I would take them and be able to drop them. Or if you're going to have a 10 or someone there, I would take advantage of it. And just, within 5 minutes, 10 minutes before you start, go through the movements for 2, 3, 4 minutes, drop them, and then walk down, because usually your waves are going off for 3 to 5 minutes apart. So you finish up before that last wave before yours goes in, so that by the time you walk down there, you can get right into the water and be lined up.
Good. So I'm sorry, I wasn't there at the start again, I apologize, but did you discuss technique at all with regard to using the bands?
So the way we're starting it is like, it's very hard to really get into like showing you the proper movements in a Zoom meeting, right? What I have done is I actually wrote a resistance band 8-week swim dry land plan last spring when COVID shut everything down, that we put up for sale on Training Peaks. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a code that I'll give to Hillary to send out to you guys with a link to it. If you want it, so you can get it for free. And in that, my business partner, AJ, he did a ton of videos, like walking you through all the different movements, what you should be aiming for, things like that. What we actually can do is, if Hillary will give me control, I'll do a screen share and I'll show you guys one of them. It's less than a minute long, but you'll get a good look at AJ, who's the better looking of the two of us, and that's why he's in front of the camera, and give you kind of a feel for what we're doing here. So I'm gonna share. Now I need to share sound so you guys can hear him talk. And all right, can you guys see my blank YouTube screen here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Can you hear the noise?
Yes.
Okay, now we're going to do the catch-up stroke. So again, you're facing the pole, you're bending at the waist, and this time you're going to be doing one arm at a time, okay? So you're going to be catching first, and then pulling, finishing the stroke, and you're going to be putting your arm back before you start the second one. Okay, so catch, pull, finish the stroke, put the arm back. Okay, as you get better at this, it can become a more fluid movement, but as you're starting, it's totally fine to break this up into different movements.
Got it. Cool.
So that one is, I'll say, a little more complex in that it encompasses the totality of the swim stroke. In the beginning sections of the plan, we actually even have videos that break down just what you should be aiming for to get that first part, or how to get from here to here, where we really break down all the different individual pieces of the stroke and what you should be targeting as well. I just pulled that one up because it was kind of had everything in it. But yeah, I think we did, I think we did 8 videos on just the different movements. And then we also incorporate other great strength movements that you can do the bands with, like doing how you can use them to do rows and chest presses and things like that to take your dry land, your resistance training a little further than just like basic swim movements. So I will get that stuff squared away and get that to Hillary once we're all done here, so that when she sends out the recap, it'll have the code for you guys, and then it'll also link right to where you can pick it up and use your code so that you guys can get it for free.
Velosurance, this is Dave.
Hi, Dave. How are you?
He muted himself as soon as he said hi, and then he muted.
So Dave is from Velosurance. He is one of our sponsors as well, and they do bike insurance.
Mhm.
He's actually,
Sorry, I'm on a phone call. Sorry.
no problem. I use him for my bike insurance.
Yeah,
It was hard to find somebody who insures bikes, so
it is that. Yeah, like mine are covered under my umbrella policy.
really, because
yeah.
mine was not.
Right. And you know, if you've been doing this long, you know, like bikes are expensive. They get expensive quick. You know, like I was unfortunate enough in my younger years, like I went through a divorce, you know, and I was when I was leaving, you know, I have some friends were helping me pack up some stuff, and I was taking my bikes out, you know, some of my bikes out, and I had them loaded up on my bike rack on my car. And my buddy was like, so you either need to sell a bike or get a nicer car, because the roof of your car is now worth more than your car. And I was like, well, I guess I got to go get a new car because I'm not getting rid of my bikes. And I was like, yeah. So, you know, bikes are definitely, you know, they get up there really quick. I mean, you can spend as much or more than you would spend on a used car, you know.
Mhm.
So that is definitely critical. If you can get them insured, you
Yeah,
should.
I've been I'm very happy with Velosurance, and you know, so I'm grateful that they're sponsoring the team.
Yeah, no, that's a very it's not really thought of. You know, and another thing to since we're talking about kind of like auxiliary things for bikes, if you're a AAA member, they cover you if you need to be picked up on your bike.
I heard that.
And they'll come help, like they carry bike tubes and stuff like in their service vehicles. So you can actually, if you have an issue, you can call AAA just like you were in your car, and they will come out and take care of you just the same. My mom for years she buys me and my 2 sisters AAA policies for Christmas. You know, I'm like 36, and it's like, Mom, you could just transfer that over. Like, you don't have to keep doing that, but she really enjoys doing it, you know, which I appreciate it. Like I would have it otherwise. So I certainly appreciate it. And we found out, like she told me maybe like 4 years ago, she was like, oh, I got a thing from AAA saying that, did you know that? And I was like, no, but that's awesome. Like, because I've certainly been in a situation where I've been broke down 20 miles from home and had to call somebody, you know, or whatever. So another pro tip, we'll call it, is your AAA will cover you on your bike as well.
Awesome.
So Tim, in the video that you showed, there was a foosball table in the background. Is that required for swimming?
Yes. Actually, what's funny is usually I go to Colorado every year for we have a coaching summit in our company, and AJ lives out there. You know, just retired from being a pro, I guess last year or so. You know, all the pros are in Colorado, so I usually go and I just stay with him at his house. And we didn't go this past winter, but the winter before, we went out and we had a few extra people staying. He's trying to fit more people in his house. And so he was like, do you care if I, just go get you like a nice air mattress and you can, and I'm like, no, I don't care. Like you're putting me up and saving me from having to go rent a hotel. So no, whatever. So where he shot that video is where my bed was. And he actually had to move my bed to shoot the videos because he hadn't went down there and deflated it yet and packed it up. So yes, the foosball table is required. You can't really tell, but he's wearing like a flat brimmed like Bone Thugs and Harmony hat. That definitely makes you faster. I was like, come on, man, like really? And I'm like, but to be fair, that's just the best. That's who he is, the way he's always been. So he shouldn't change it, right? Like,
Does the beard create drag?
what's that? The beer? Yeah. So we don't race in the wintertime, so I let it go for warmth a little bit. And then, when the season rolls around, then I go back to just the goatee and I shorten it all up, no, this is it's COVID and I've partially given up look, but I'm not fully there yet. That's why I'm wearing a hat too, because my hair is, hair is a little all over the place too.
Any other questions about dry land? And looks like Dave is joining us from The Right Stuff.
We're getting all the Daves.
A lot of Daves on this call. A lot of Steve Daves.
Is anybody else, any other band questions or just, general questions are fine too. Obviously, I'm always happy to help you guys however I can.
No,
Nope.
Taught you guys everything
today.
for today.
So what are we going to talk about next, Tim?
I've been giving that some thought because it's starting to feel more and more like we're about to transition back to racing in some form. So maybe we can talk about, like, I have quite a few friends that are like race directors and we've been having conversations, so we can maybe talk about that transition back to racing and what that's going to look like. Because obviously there's a lot of additional protocols being put in place and there's also different comfort levels. Some people are much more comfortable than others, in those settings. So we could talk about, transitioning back to racing and what that's going to look like for the immediate future if you want.
That would be great.
And also, if you guys, I'm doing this for you guys. So if there's anything you want to talk about, just send me or Hillary a message and let us know, and we'll put it together. Like, I'm happy to sit here and talk about anything. So, and share my knowledge. And if it's something that I'm not knowledgeable about, then I can easily pull someone in and do it. My network of people is pretty extensive with the time I've been in the sport. So, if I don't know it, I surely know someone who does. So I can easily, make some calls and pull some people in if there's some topics you guys want to cover that I don't know. Or if there's just anybody you want to hear from, because a lot of triathletes are fanboys and girls of certain people. If you guys have somebody, just let me know, and most likely they're a friend or a mutual friend, and we can even do like something like that. It doesn't matter.
Cool.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Hey, Dave, do you want to say a couple of words about Velosurance while you're on the line?
Good morning. It's a
Hello.
nice day. It's a sunny day in South Florida today, the greatest state in the nation. I'm sorry you guys are all suffering. I'm going to be on with Hillary next Monday. And just, I wouldn't mind a few pointers as to what the cycling public finds interesting. Well, insurance is never interesting. What the riding public believes would be some interesting questions to answer about, basically about bicycle insurance.
Okay.
I would actually be interested in hearing, because here in Maryland, this tends to be a very big topic, is oftentimes you have a bike and vehicle collision, right? And things tend to be swayed very much to be favorable towards the drivers over cyclists. So I would be curious as to your opinion on that, and if you're noticing any trends or maybe shifting in mindsets in the insurance industry on maybe that's changing direction as cycling continues to grow in popularity.
Okay, I heard most of that. My phone is gonna ring like crazy. One of our guys are out, so it'll stop ringing. And there we go. Okay, so
You know what? I
Yeah.
have another one, right? Where this happened. It happened to this one woman where she picks up her bike from the bike store, puts it on the back of the bike of the car, and she didn't like put it in good. So the bike went flying off the car while she was driving and it got destroyed. Now, is that covered by bike insurance or auto insurance?
it's never covered by the auto insurance. It's on the outside of the car. They have no interest in it.
Okay.
Okay,
So
it's
that's
covered. There may be some coverage on a homeowner's policy, although you never know how bad homeowners policies are until you have a claim. The Velosurance policy covers the bike at all times in transit. That's in transit. No matter how it's being transited, it's covered. Car, air, you give it to Tri-Bike Transport, you don't have to buy their insurance, it's covered.
Oh, that's good. That's interesting. I don't know why I'm.
I mean, I think if you went to, I think 5 events a year and sent your bike with Tri-Bike Transport, you could have purchased a policy from us that covers everything for the entire year for the same amount of money.
That's something. Anybody else have any questions that they would want to know about bike insurance?
Yeah, how do you determine premiums for that?
Based on where you live, what you're doing with the bike, and the value of the bike.
That's a good question, though. That would be a good one for the show. Too. Tim, you have any others?
Yeah, if you live in San Diego, you're going to pay about 40% more than somebody who lives in Minnesota. San Diego, 12 months of the year riding. Minnesota, 5 months of the year riding and 7 months ice fishing.
What if you ride your bike to your fishing hole?
Yep.
Sorry, I'm a troublemaker. That's just what I do.
Well, it's like I said, insurance is not the most interesting subject out there. Everyone, we are all insurance rich and money poor. So we don't like to pay for it, but when there is an accident, I got caught in a hailstorm in Colorado last year, and that caused $11,000 worth of damage to my Xterra. But I got the bike off the back as quick as I could and left the car outside.
That's fair. I probably would have done the exact same thing.
So when we put Velosurance together, we came from a general insurance agency that we had owned for years, and we knew all of the shortcomings of a homeowner's policy. We took away all of those silly restrictions when we wrote the Velosurance policy.
Cool.
Smart.
So, all right. So anybody else have any other questions about dryland? We're going to go back to dryland training.
Yeah.
And if anybody doesn't have bands and you're looking for a particular band or something like that, for this purpose, like I was saying, I prefer these because they have the paddles on them. Just my preference. If that's something that you're looking for, The company is called Stretch Cords, and they're actually made in the US. And they're color coordinated. So these ones are green. They're all different tension levels by color. If you have if you decide you want to go with something like this and you have a question about what resistance you should get, like, feel free to shoot me a message and I'll talk you through it. The reality is most people get what they think they need, and it's usually too heavy. And it's much easier to go light because you can always walk back and increase tension. But if they're too heavy, it's almost impossible to fix that. So if that's something you're interested in, like, I don't work for them or have a partnership with them or anything. They're just the company that I use and have the most success with. But there's plenty of them out there. And if you choose to get the free plan on Training Peaks, in the first workouts at the very bottom of the description, we have links to like 6 different types, different manufacturers, to give you guys different options and stuff. So any questions about that stuff, please feel free to ask.
That's awesome. We really appreciate that. Thank you, Tim. All right, so thank you all for joining in today. It's an hour up at 1 o'clock. So I'm going to just sign out right now, and until next time.
Thank
Have
you.
a good day, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tim.
Bye, thank you.